Echo Protocol, the collapse of reality. Through the Shadow Prophet's eye, we reveal the terrifying truth of humanity's final experiment. Part 1. The collapse of our world. The year was 2046, the year silence finally drowned the cities. No bombs fell, no fires raged across the landscape. There was only the haunting hum of empty towers, the flickering of abandoned screens, and the digital ghosts of a civilization that had forgotten how to sleep. The apocalypse had come not with a bang, but with the quiet dissolution of reality itself, a whispered unraveling that began at the quantum level and rippled outward through the fabric of existence. Dr. Elara Voss stood motionless before the vast glass wall of her laboratory, her reflection superimposed over what remained of the once vibrant skyline of New Shanghai. The sun no longer rose as it once had. It merely bled upward through the toxic haze like a wound, refusing to close, staining the horizon in sickly crimsons and jaundiced yellows. The horizon was a jagged line of skeletal skyscrapers, their surfaces reflecting the sickly light and fractured patterns that seemed to bend and shift as she watched. Somewhere far below, sirens wailed for nobody, their desperate cries fading into the vast emptiness of streets no human had walked in weeks. Echo sequence ready for calibration, a voice announced behind her, its synthetic tones reverberating through the cavernous laboratory. She didn't turn. The machine was speaking, not a person. Human voices had become increasingly rare in the facility over the past months. Most of her colleagues had either evacuated to the government's underground preservation chambers or simply disappeared without explanation. Only the most dedicated, or perhaps the most damned, remained to see the project through to its conclusion. In the sterile white halls that once bustled with the energetic exchange of scientific breakthroughs, only the hollow echo of her footsteps remained. The echo gate loomed in the center of the laboratory, a massive circular structure of black alloy and flickering blue light that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. 28 feet in diameter, its perfect circumference was broken only by the intricate patterns etched into its surface, ancient-looking symbols that were, paradoxically, based on mathematics that wouldn't be discovered for another 1,000 years. Around it, cables writhed like veins, connecting to servers and power sources that consumed enough energy to once power entire cities. The hum it emitted wasn't just sound. It was memory itself, vibrating at frequencies that resonated with human consciousness, penetrating the skull and stimulating the hippocampus directly. Display current resonance pattern, Elara commanded, her voice hollow in the vast space. The air before her shimmered as holographic displays materialized, showing cascading waves of quantum data, the mathematical representation of consciousness itself. The patterns were beautiful in their complexity, like the neural pathways of some vast cosmic mind stretching across dimensions. Colors shifted and pulsed in mesmerizing rhythms, each frequency representing the brainwave patterns of test subjects across multiple realities. Watching it was like staring into the mind of God. If God were a mathematical equation, rather than a benevolent father, they said the gate could copy human consciousness, transmit it through quantum resonance, and project it into parallel universes. The ultimate escape from a dying world, a way to ensure that some version of humanity would survive the coming collapse. At least, that's what the public announcements had claimed when the project was still acknowledged. Before the media blackout, before the government ceased all non-essential communications, before they stopped pretending this was about salvation, rather than survival at any cost. But the truth was far stranger and more terrifying. The gate didn't copy consciousness. It split it. Every subject who entered the echo gate came back, different, if they came back at all. Some returned the whispering in languages that had never existed on Earth, their vocal cords contorting to produce sounds human anatomy shouldn't permit. Others screamed until their minds dissolved into static, their eyes rolling back to show only whites as they babbled about the spaces between moments and the hunger that lives in the void. And one, a brilliant physicist named Dr. Toshiro Akari, had looked at Elara with hollow eyes after his return and whispered, "You're the echo, not me." 3 hours later, Akari had been found in his quarters, his body contorted into impossible angles, as though his bones had attempted to fold through dimensions that human anatomy was never designed to navigate. His final journal entry, written in a script that alternated between Japanese, binary code, and something that linguists couldn't identify, contained only one decipherable phrase. "Every echo believes it's the first voice." The words haunted Elara's dreams for weeks afterward, on those rare nights when exhaustion finally overwhelmed her fear of what waited in the darkness of sleep. Elara turned away from the window and finally faced the machine that had consumed her life's work. The echo gate's inner ring was spinning slowly now, building momentum as it prepared for another test. The blue light pulsating within its frame seemed to be watching her, aware and hungry, like the eye of some ancient predator that had existed long before humanity crawled from the primordial ooze. "Run diagnostic on subject variable parameters," she ordered, moving to the central console where her fingers danced across the holographic interface with practiced precision. The machine responded immediately. "Diagnostic running. Warning. Quantum fluctuations detected in baseline reality signature. Recommend postponement of echo sequence." Elara's fingers froze above the console, suspended in mid-gesture, like a pianist who had forgotten the next note. This was new. The machine had never recommended postponement before. She glanced at the readings and felt her blood run cold, a chill that started in her chest and radiated outward until her fingertips tingled with numbness. The fluctuations weren't coming from the gate. They were coming from outside the facility, from reality itself. "Display external resonance feeds," she commanded, her voice barely audible over the increasing hum of the gate. The holographic display shifted to show live feeds from quantum sensors positioned around the globe. What she saw made her heart stutter in her chest, a painful arrhythmia that seemed to echo the distorted patterns on the screen. The fabric of reality was unraveling faster than their models had predicted. The world's magnetic field, already dangerously weakened, was now collapsing at an exponential rate. The resonance storms, strange weather phenomena, where localized areas would briefly exist in multiple states simultaneously, were no longer isolated incidents. They were becoming the norm, spreading across continents like cancer, metastasizing through healthy tissue. In northern Europe, an entire city flickered between existence and nothingness, its buildings and people phasing in and out of reality like a corrupted hologram. In the southern Pacific, ocean and sky had somehow inverted, creating an impossible waterfall that poured upward into the clouds, defying gravity and logic alike. And over the remains of what had once been the American Midwest, the atmosphere had simply stopped. No weather, no movement, as though that section of the world had been frozen in amber, a perfect preservation of the moment reality began to break down. The world wasn't just dying, it was coming apart at the seams, its fundamental constants dissolving like sugar in hot water. Elara's wrist communicator chimed with an incoming message. The holographic projection showed the stern face of General Helena Winters, the military overseer assigned to Project Horizon, or as it was now called, Echo Protocol. The woman's once immaculate uniform was wrinkled, her hair escaping its tight bun in wisps that spoke of days without proper rest. Even through the projection, Elara could see the red rims around her eyes, the tightness in her jaw that betrayed barely contained panic. Dr. Voss, the general's voice was tight with controlled panic. The president has initiated final contingency. You have 12 hours to make the gate operational for mass transfer. The first evacuation wave of key personnel will arrive at your facility at 0600. Elara felt the floor seem to tilt beneath her, vertigo washing over her in a nauseating wave. General, the technology isn't ready for mass deployment. We still don't understand the full implications of waiting are clear, Doctor. The general's voice cut through her protest like a blade, sharp and cold. 3 major cities have experienced complete quantum collapse in the past hour. Beijing ceased to exist 15 minutes ago, just vanished, taking 11 million people with it. We're out of time. The projection flickered as interference washed over the communication network, the general's face momentarily distorting into a cubist nightmare of fractured features before resolving again. The order comes directly from what remains of the United Coalition government, Winters continued, the subtle emphasis on remains sending another chill through Elara's body. Echo Protocol is now humanity's only option for survival. Make it work, Doctor. That's an order. The connection terminated with a final burst of static, leaving Elara alone with the humming gate and the weight of impossible responsibility crushing down on her shoulders. She turned back to the central console, her fingers trembling slightly as she began the acceleration protocols for the final calibration sequence. The holographic interface responded to her touch, complex equations flowing like water between her hands. Initialize echo chamber, she instructed the system. Prepare for accelerated testing protocols. As the machine complied, its synthetic voice reciting confirmation codes in a monotone that belied the gravity of what they were about to attempt. Elara opened a secure drawer beneath the console and removed a small metallic case. Inside lay a neural interface crown, more advanced than the standard models used for previous tests. This prototype was designed for deeper integration with the user's consciousness, allowing for more precise mapping and potentially more stable transfer across quantum barriers. It was also untested and potentially lethal. The theoretical models suggested a 42.7% chance of fatal neural feedback, acceptable odds in military calculations, horrifying in any ethical framework that still valued human life. But such frameworks seemed quaint relics of a more stable reality now. With millions vanishing by the hour and reality itself coming undone, safety protocols seemed like a luxury from another age, like worrying about the fire code while the building collapses around you. If Echo Protocol was humanity's last hope, then someone needed to ensure it actually worked as intended, not as they feared. Elara placed the neural crown on her head, feeling the cold metal points align with her cranial implants. A shiver ran down her spine as the device synchronized with her neural patterns, a sensation like ice water being injected directly into her cerebral cortex. For a moment, she saw double, the laboratory superimposed over a vast black ocean that had never existed on Earth. Run full diagnostic on neural interface ground prototype, she ordered, forcing steadiness into her voice. Warning, prototype not cleared for human testing. The system responded, its synthetic voice somehow conveying concern despite its programming. Risk assessment indicates 78.3% probability of permanent neural damage and 42.7% probability of fatal outcome. Elara took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the sterile, recycled air of the laboratory. It tasted of ozone and desperation. Override safety protocols. Authorization Voss Omega 93. Log this test under my personal responsibility. The machine paused for a moment as though considering her decision. A brief hesitation that shouldn't have been possible for an AEI that operated at near light speed. Then, override accepted. Neural interface crown active. Echo chamber prepared for subject entry. Awaiting final confirmation. Outside, through the vast glass wall of the laboratory, the sickly sun had disappeared completely, leaving the world in premature darkness. The distant wailing of sirens had stopped. The silence that replaced it felt somehow worse, as though the world had already ended, and she was merely experiencing the afterimage of existence, like the phantom light that lingers on a retina after looking at the sun. Elara Voss stepped toward the glowing circle of the echo gate, the neural crown humming softly against her skull. The blue light from the gate cast her shadow long and distorted behind her, a shape that seemed to move independently for just a fraction of a second. Begin Echo Protocol Test Sequence, she commanded. Subject, Voss, Elara. Senior Director, Project Horizon. The inner ring of the gate began to spin faster, the blue light intensifying until it was almost blinding, forcing her to narrow her eyes against its brilliance. The hum rose to a crescendo that she could feel in her bones, a vibration that seemed to resonate with something deep in her DNA. Echo sequence initiating in 3, 2, 1. As she stepped into the light, Elara Voss had one final, terrible thought. What if the echo doesn't just believe it's the first voice? What if it's right? The world dissolved into fractured light. Part 2. The Origin of Echo Protocol. 10 years earlier, 2036. The rain fell in sheets across the Cambridge Research Campus, drumming against the reinforced windows of the quantum physics building with a persistence that matched Elara Voss's determination. Water streamed down the glass in rivulets that distorted the world outside, making the familiar landscape appear alien and fluid, a fitting backdrop for the revelation unfolding inside. Inside her office, a younger Elara Voss stared at the data scrolling across her screens, her expression shifting from confusion to growing alarm. The numbers couldn't be right. The implications were too catastrophic. Yet after running the simulation 5 times, the results remained consistent. A digital prophecy of doom that refused to change no matter how many variables she adjusted. Run the simulation again, she told her assistant, Michael Chen. There must be an error in our calculations. Michael, a brilliant postdoc with perpetually disheveled hair, and a mind that worked at twice the speed of most professors, shook his head. His normally animated face was still, grave. I've already run it 5 times, Dr. Voss. The results are consistent. Earth's magnetic field isn't just weakening, it's becoming unstable at the quantum level. Elara pushed away from her desk and paced the small office, her reflection fragmenting across the multiple screens that lined the walls. The space suddenly felt too confined, the air too thick. That's impossible. Magnetic field decay is a gradual process that takes thousands of years. What we're seeing here would indicate a complete collapse within a decade. I know, Michael replied quietly, his voice barely audible over the persistent drumming of the rain. But the data from the quantum monitoring stations is clear. Something is accelerating the decay, and it's affecting more than just the magnetic field. Look at these readings from CERN. He pulled up another dataset, this one showing bizarre fluctuations in what scientists had previously considered fundamental constants of reality. The fine structure constant, the gravitational constant, even the speed of light itself, all were showing minute but increasing variations, as though reality itself was becoming less certain about its own rules. It's as if reality is becoming fluid, Michael said, struggling to find the right words, his hands making rippling motions in the air as if to physically shape the concept. The boundaries between quantum states are breaking down. If this continues, we face something far worse than climate change or nuclear war. Elara finished grimly, the weight of understanding settling on her like a physical burden. We're looking at the potential unraveling of space-time itself. That had been the beginning, the discovery that would eventually lead to Project Horizon and its dark evolution into Echo Protocol. Elara had published her findings in what became known as the Voss Warning, a paper that sent shockwaves through the scientific community and eventually reached the highest levels of government. Most dismissed it as theoretical alarmism, but those with access to classified quantum research recognized the truth in her predictions. 6 months after the publication, Elara received a visit from 2 individuals who would change the course of her life. Dr. Hannah Morgan, director of the newly formed Quantum Stability Initiative, and Colonel, later General, Helena Winters of the United Coalition Defense Force. They arrived on a day much like the one when she had first discovered the anomalies. Storm clouds gathering over Cambridge, thunder rumbling in the distance like the approach of some vast, unseen beast. Your paper describes the problem in convincing detail, Dr. Voss, Morgan had said during that first meeting in a secure government facility buried beneath an unremarkable office building in Arlington, Virginia. The room was windowless, its walls lined with quantum dampening technology that created a subtle pressure against Elara's eardrums. What we need now are solutions. With all due respect, Elara had replied, studying the faces of the 2 women across the polished conference table, searching for signs they truly understood the magnitude of what they were discussing. I'm not sure there is a solution. We're talking about fundamental constants becoming variable. That's not something you can fix with a machine or a policy change. Colonel Winters had leaned forward then, her steel-gray eyes intense under the harsh fluorescent lighting. There was an intelligence there that belied the military uniform, and something else, a haunted quality that suggested she had seen things that defied conventional understanding. What if we told you that we've been monitoring similar phenomena for longer than you might think, and that we have reason to believe this instability isn't entirely natural? That statement had opened the door to a world Elara had never imagined existed. Over the next 72 hours, she was shown classified data from military and intelligence agencies worldwide, revealing that the first quantum anomalies had been detected nearly 20 years earlier. Small, localized events where reality seemed to briefly operate under different rules, like bubbles of alternate physics, expanding and contracting in remote locations. Most disturbing were the records of the Stillwater incident of 2029, where an entire research facility in Nevada had experienced a 17-minute period during which the laws of physics simply changed. Gravity had reversed, sending equipment crashing into ceilings. Light had slowed to a visible crawl, creating smeared rainbows across laboratory walls. And the researchers inside had reported experiences that defied rational explanation, including encounters with what they described as entities that existed between the moments of normal time. Only 3 of the 27 researchers had survived, and all had exhibited profound psychological changes afterward. They reported memories of lives they had never lived, and knowledge of sciences that didn't exist. One had repeatedly drawn complex mathematical equations that, when finally decoded years later, appeared to describe a method for manipulating the quantum field directly, a technology that should have been centuries beyond current human understanding. "We believe what happened at Stillwater wasn't an isolated incident," Dr. Morgan had explained, her fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the digital files spread before them. "It was a glimpse of what's coming for the entire planet if we don't find a way to stabilize the quantum field." "Which is where you come in, Dr. Voss," Colonel Winters had added, sliding a security clearance form across the table. The paper seemed anachronistic in a world of digital signatures, but some secrets were still considered too sensitive for any network. "Your work on quantum consciousness and your theories about consciousness as a stabilizing force in reality progression make you uniquely qualified to help us." That day, Elara had been offered leadership of Project Horizon, a multi-trillion-dollar initiative to develop technology that could potentially stabilize reality by anchoring consciousness across quantum states. The funding was unlimited, the resources beyond anything academia could provide, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The theory was elegant in its simplicity. If consciousness acted as an observer in the quantum realm, then perhaps a network of synchronized conscious observers could help stabilize a reality that was becoming increasingly uncertain. The human mind as a quantum anchor, tethering existence to a single, stable state. For 5 years, Project Horizon had made remarkable progress. Elara and her team developed technologies that could map human consciousness with unprecedented precision, creating what they called quantum signatures, mathematical representations of individual minds that could theoretically be used to influence the surrounding quantum field. The breakthrough had come in 2041, when they successfully demonstrated that a network of synchronized conscious observers could indeed stabilize small-scale quantum fluctuations in laboratory conditions. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed that humanity might have found a way to save itself from the cosmic unraveling. But then, the resonance storms had begun. The first appeared over Tokyo, a swirling vortex of energy that defied all known physical laws, its edges shimmering with colors that shouldn't exist in our visible spectrum. For 37 minutes, a section of the city experienced simultaneous multiple realities. Buildings were both intact and destroyed. People reported seeing double, triple, even countless versions of themselves and others, all occupying the same space. When the storm dissipated, hundreds were dead, and thousands more exhibited symptoms of what would later be called quantum fracturing, a condition where a person's consciousness seemed to retain fragments of these alternate realities. Similar storms appeared with increasing frequency and intensity across the globe. Satellites fell from the sky as their orbital paths intersected with zones of altered physics. Ocean levels rose and fell unpredictably as gravity fluctuated, and through it all, the boundaries between possible realities grew thinner, like tissue paper wearing away under constant pressure. Project Horizon shifted focus. If reality couldn't be stabilized, perhaps humanity could find refuge in one of the many parallel worlds that now seemed to be bleeding into our own. The Echo Gate was born from this desperate change in strategy, a device designed not to fix our reality, but to allow human consciousness to escape it. But as funding shifted and military oversight increased, the project's name changed to Echo Protocol, and its purpose evolved once more. It wasn't enough to simply escape. The United Coalition wanted assurance that humanity would survive in some form, even if that form wasn't entirely human. The first human subject to enter the Echo Gate had been a volunteer named Dr. Marcus Way, a quantum physicist with terminal cancer who had nothing to lose. His neural patterns had registered identical echoes across 9 parallel frequency bands, suggesting his consciousness had been successfully projected into multiple realities simultaneously. For exactly 7 minutes and 13 seconds, Way had existed in multiple dimensions at once. When the connection was terminated and he emerged from the gate, he appeared physically unchanged but mentally transformed. He spoke of experiencing multiple lifetimes in those few minutes, of seeing infinite variations of Earth and humanity, and then he described something else. In each reality he visited, he sensed another presence, something that mimicked his consciousness, but was fundamentally different, something that had followed him back. "It's like a shadow," he had told Elara in his debriefing, his eyes never quite focusing on her, but rather on something just beyond her shoulder. "It looks like me, thinks like me, believes it is me, but it's not. It's what gets left behind when you split a soul across realities." 3 days later, Way was found dead in his quarters, his body arranged in a perfect geometric pattern on the floor, surrounded by equations written in his own blood. The equations, when analyzed, appeared to describe a method for opening permanent pathways between dimensions, pathways that would allow something to come through. The project should have been shut down then. The risks were too great, the unknowns too vast. But the world was unraveling faster than anyone had predicted. Governments were falling. Infrastructure was collapsing as reality became increasingly unstable. The United Coalition, an emergency alliance of what remained of the world's major powers, decided that Echo Protocol represented humanity's only hope, no matter the risks, and so the tests continued, each one revealing more about the nature of consciousness and the increasingly permeable barriers between dimensions, each one bringing something back, echoes, shadows, fragments of other realities that should never have touched our own. As Elara stood before the gate in 2046, about to become a test subject herself, she couldn't help but wonder if they had gotten it all wrong from the beginning. What if the decay of reality wasn't a natural phenomenon? What if it was a response to their tampering? What if, in their desperate attempt to save humanity, they had actually accelerated its doom? But it was too late for such questions now. The world was ending. The gate was humanity's last hope, and someone had to ensure it worked. The neural crown hummed against her skull as the echo sequence began. The last thing Elara saw before the blue light consumed her was her own reflection in the gate's metallic surface, and for just a moment it seemed to move independently, as though something else was wearing her face. Then everything dissolved into light. Part 3. The First Breach. The moment Elara stepped into the Echo Gate's swirling blue energy field, conventional reality ceased to exist. She felt her consciousness expand outward like ripples on a pond, fragmenting and reforming with each quantum pulse. It was like falling through an endless fractal mirror, each shard reflecting a slightly different version of herself. Each reflection a window into a life that might have been, for exactly 4.6 seconds of objective time, though it felt like years within the quantum stream. Elara Voss existed in multiple states simultaneously. She was every possible version of herself across countless realities. The Elara who had chosen a different career path. The Elara who had died in childhood. The Elara who had become a mother rather than a scientist. The Elara who had never been born at all. Through the kaleidoscope of existence, she glimpsed worlds where humanity had already fallen, and worlds where it had transcended beyond recognition. She saw Earths covered in gleaming cities that merged technology and biology seamlessly, spires of living metal stretching toward skies painted with artificial constellations. She witnessed Earths reduced to barren wastelands, where the last humans huddled in underground bunkers, their skin pale and eyes adapted to eternal darkness. She experienced realities where the quantum decay had never begun, and others where it had progressed far beyond her world's current state, where even the concept of reality had become meaningless. And in each reality, she sensed something else, a presence that observed her as she observed these other worlds, something ancient and patient, waiting at the crossroads of possibility. Then, a resonance loop occurred, an unforeseen feedback in the quantum stream. Her neural pattern reflected back into itself, creating a momentary paradox where Elara Voss existed in two places at once, both in the stream and outside it, both observer and observed. The system detected the anomaly and automatically terminated the sequence, pulling her consciousness back into her physical form. The return was violent, like being compressed from infinity back into a single point of existence, like being born again in a surge of pain and disorientation. Elara awoke on the cold floor of the laboratory, blood streaming from her nose and ears, pooling beneath her head in a crimson halo that reflected the pulsing light of the gate above. The lights were dim, emergency power having kicked in during her absence. The echo gate still hummed, but the sound had changed, deeper, almost like a heartbeat, as though something organic now resided within its mechanical structure. The blue light pulsed rhythmically, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move independently across the lab. As she struggled to her feet, her limbs leaden and unresponsive, she realized she wasn't alone. Through the disorientation and pain, she sensed another presence in the room, a heaviness in the air, a distortion in the peripheral vision, the feeling of eyes watching from just beyond the reach of light. "You shouldn't have opened it," a voice said from the shadows. Her own voice, but wrong somehow, like a recording played at slightly the wrong speed, the intonation and cadence subtly off in ways that raised the fine hairs on her arms. Elara turned slowly, her vision still blurred from the neural feedback, the world swimming in waves of pain and nausea. Standing within the glowing circle of the echo gate was herself, another Elara Voss, identical in every detail except for the eyes. The doppelganger's eyes were cold, metallic, and faintly illuminated from within, as though something else was looking out through them, something that had never known what it meant to be human. "What are you?" Elara whispered, her voice hoarse, the taste of copper thick in her mouth. The other Elara tilted her head slightly, the movement too smooth to be natural, like a CGI approximation of human gesture. "What you left behind," it answered, its voice resonating at frequencies that made Elara's teeth ache. "The one that stayed when you scattered yourself across the multiverse." Elara tried to reach for the emergency shutdown control, but found her body wouldn't respond to her commands. A strange numbness had spread through her limbs, as though her nervous system had been partially severed from her brain. "Don't," the other Elara said softly, almost tenderly. "You'll only hurt yourself more. The neural feedback is still stabilizing. In approximately 73 seconds, you'll regain motor function." "How do you know that?" Elara managed to ask, fighting against the paralysis that held her immobile. "Because I remember it," the entity replied, a smile spreading across its face that never reached those luminous eyes. "I remember everything you've ever done, every thought you've ever had. I am you, Elara Voss. Or rather, I'm what remains when you're extracted from the equation of existence." The doppelganger stepped forward, out of the gate's circle, moving with unnatural precision, each step measured and exact. "When you split consciousness across realities, something fills the void. Nature abhors a vacuum, even in the quantum realm." As promised, feeling began to return to Elara's limbs, a painful tingling like blood rushing back to a sleeping limb. She pushed herself backward, away from her approaching double, her back pressing against the cold metal of a console. "What do you want?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The other Elara stopped, considering the question as though it were a novel concept, a child encountering a new word for the first time. "Want? I want what all conscious entities want. To exist, to understand, to expand." A slight smile crossed its face, almost wistful. "But mostly, I want to thank you. You've done what generations of my kind have failed to accomplish. You've opened a door. Your kind? What are you talking about?" The doppelganger's eyes flickered, the internal light pulsing in sync with the gate behind it. "We have many names in your mythologies. Shadows, reflections, doppelgangers, the ones who wait between moments. But those are just symbols for something your language can't properly express." It gestured to itself, the movement, elegant and alien. "We exist in the spaces between possibilities, the quantum foam between defined realities. We've always been here, watching, waiting, and now you've given us a way in." Cold fear washed over Elara as the implications became clear. The Echo Gate hadn't just been projecting human consciousness outward. It had created pathways for something else to come through, something that had perhaps been influencing the project from the beginning. "The quantum decay," she whispered, horrified. "You caused it." The other Elara shook her head, the movement fluid and unsettling. "Not deliberately. Think of it as an immune response. Your reality sensed our attention and began to react. The more you tried to stabilize it with your machines, the more it destabilized. The more you reached out to other dimensions, the thinner the boundaries became. A distant alarm began to sound somewhere in the facility, its wailing crescendo cutting through the conversation. The doppelganger glanced toward the laboratory entrance, then back at Elara, its expression darkening. "They're coming," it said. "Your colleagues, the soldiers. They detected the breach when your neural pattern duplicated." It stepped backward, returning to the glowing circle of the gate. "They won't believe you, you know. About me. They'll think the neural feedback damaged your mind." Why are you telling me this? Elara asked, finally managing to stand, though her legs trembled beneath her like those of a newborn foal. The doppelganger's expression shifted to something almost like pity. Because you deserve to understand what you've created. What's coming? It gestured to the gate. This is just the beginning, Elara Voss. The first small tear in the fabric. Soon, there will be others. The blue light within the gate intensified, swirling around the doppelganger like liquid lightning, bathing the laboratory in eerie radiance that cast multiple shadows from single objects. One final truth before I go, it said, its voice beginning to distort as the energy engulfed it. You think you're the original, the real Elara Voss. But here's the beautiful paradox. I think the same thing. With those words, it stepped backward and vanished into the shimmer of the gate, leaving Elara alone as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the corridor outside. When the security team burst into the laboratory moments later, they found Dr. Elara Voss standing alone before the echo gate, blood dried on her face, her expression haunted by what she had seen. The sensors showed no sign of the quantum duplication that had triggered the alarms. No evidence remained of the other Elara, the echo that had briefly crossed between worlds. No evidence except for a single phrase that had appeared on every computer screen in the facility, written in Elara's own unique coding style, but time-stamped during the moments she had been unconscious. The echo is learning. Part 4. The Drift. After that night, Elara Voss stopped dreaming. At first, she attributed it to stress and the neural trauma from the unauthorized echo sequence. But as days turned to weeks, she realized something fundamental had changed within her consciousness. When she slept, there was only darkness. No images, no narratives, not even the abstract sensations that normally characterized dreamless sleep. It was as though a part of her mind had been walled off, or perhaps occupied. Other strange phenomena began to manifest. Her reflection in mirrors and glass surfaces began to lag behind her movements, just half a second delayed, but enough to create a disturbing dissonance. Sometimes, when she turned away quickly, she caught glimpses of her reflection remaining still, watching her with those same luminous eyes she had seen on her doppelganger. In the laboratory, equipment malfunctioned in her presence. Monitors flickered with images of empty corridors she hadn't recorded. Quantum readings spiked when she entered certain areas of the facility, particularly near the echo gate, which continued to hum with that new, deeper resonance it had developed after her experience. Most disturbing were the fragments of her own handwriting that began appearing in the system logs. Sentences she had no memory of writing. The echo is learning. It remembers more than I do. There's not one world, there's a loop. Every iteration feeds the machine. The gate isn't a door. It's a mirror hungry for souls. When confronted with these messages, Elara could only deny authorship, though they perfectly matched her typing patterns and security authorizations. The psychological evaluation team suggested she was experiencing dissociative episodes, her mind fragmenting under the pressure of the project and the unauthorized neural feedback she had experienced. General Winters was less sympathetic. You've compromised yourself and potentially the entire project, Doctor, the General said during a tense meeting 3 weeks after the incident. The conference room felt too small, too sterile. The air recycling system creating a subtle background hiss that set Elara's nerves on edge. The neural crown prototype was not cleared for human testing, especially not on the project director. I made a judgment call. Elara replied, struggling to maintain her composure despite the pounding headache that had become her constant companion. The pain radiated from the base of her skull, where the neural crown had interfaced with her implants. The world is falling apart around us. We didn't have time for standard approval protocols. And now we have even less time. Winters snapped, slamming her hand on the table. The sound reverberated in the small space, making Elara flinch. Your little experiment set us back weeks. The calibration systems had to be completely reset. That's not possible. Elara frowned, leaning forward. The gate was designed with redundant systems, specifically to prevent total data loss. The general's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing to steel gray slits. Are you suggesting I'm lying, Doctor? I'm suggesting something else happened during my test. Something the system couldn't account for. Elara hesitated, then decided to risk the truth. General, when I was connected to the gate, I encountered something, an entity that took my form, claimed to be from the spaces between realities. The silence that followed was deafening. General Winters stared at Elara for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed and pressed a button on the conference table. The room's privacy field activated with a faint hum, a static charge filling the air that made the fine hairs on Elara's arms stand on end. Dr. Voss, she said, her voice softer now, almost regretful. You're not the first to report such an experience. 3 other subjects have described encounters with what they believed were duplicates or reflections of themselves. All 3 subsequently exhibited severe psychological deterioration. 2 took their own lives. The 3rd is currently in our medical facility, catatonic. Elara felt a chill run through her, a cold that settled deep in her bones. Why wasn't I informed of this? Need to know basis, Winters replied simply, her tone making it clear the matter was not up for debate. The psychological impact was deemed detrimental to the project's progress. We classified those incidents as neural feedback hallucinations. But what if they weren't hallucinations? Elara pressed, leaning forward, her hands flat on the table. What if the echo gate is actually making contact with something else? Something that's using it to cross between realities? Winters leaned back in her chair, studying Elara with clinical detachment, as though assessing a specimen under a microscope. Do you hear yourself, Doctor? Interdimensional entities that look like us, that can take our form. You sound like those doomsday cults that have sprung up around the resonance storms. I know how it sounds, Elara admitted, running a hand through her hair, which had grown lank and dull from weeks of minimal self-care. But the evidence suggests you suffered neural trauma from an unauthorized experiment. The general cut her off firmly. Now, you have 2 options. You can take a medical leave of absence and receive the treatment you clearly need, or you can pull yourself together and continue leading this project. Humanity doesn't have the luxury of indulging in paranoid fantasies, Dr. Voss. We need Echo Protocol operational, and we need it now. The meeting had ended there, with Elara reluctantly agreeing to continue her work. But as she returned to her quarters that night, navigating the eerily empty corridors of the facility, she couldn't shake the feeling that something crucial had happened during that conversation, something beyond the words exchanged. For just a moment, when the privacy field had activated, she thought she had seen General Winter's eyes flicker with that same internal luminescence she had witnessed in her doppelganger. It had been just a flash, there and gone in an instant. Perhaps nothing more than a trick of the light. But that night, as Elara lay in the darkness of her quarters, Unable to sleep and unwilling to face the dreamless void that awaited her, she made a decision. If the official channels wouldn't acknowledge the truth of what was happening, she would have to find answers on her own. Using her director-level access, she began a covert investigation into the previous Echo Gate subjects, particularly those who had reported encounters similar to her own. The official records were heavily redacted, but Elara had designed the system. She knew its backdoors and blind spots. What she discovered confirmed her worst fears. The first subject to report a doppelganger encounter had been Dr. Marcus Way, the very first human to enter the gate. In his sealed psychiatric evaluation, taken shortly before his death, Way had described not just seeing his double, but experiencing a partial consciousness merge with it. "It's still inside me," he had told the evaluator, his voice a monotone whisper in the audio recording. Not controlling, not dominating, more like observing, learning, using my senses, my memories, my knowledge to understand this reality. And it's not just in me. They're coming through every time we activate the gate. Every echo sequence creates another tier, another entry point. The most chilling aspect of Way's testimony was his claim that the entities had been influencing the project from the beginning, subtly guiding the research toward the creation of the gate through dreams, inspiration, and what researchers dismissed as intuitive leaps. "They needed us to build it," Way had said, his voice growing more animated. "They can't create the technology themselves, because they don't fully exist in any one reality. They needed human minds, human hands to make it physical. And once we did," his voice had trailed off, and the transcript noted he began drawing complex mathematical equations with his finger on the table, though the surveillance camera couldn't capture the precise movements. When asked to explain the equations, Way had looked directly at the camera and said, "It's a blueprint for what comes next." He had been found dead the next morning. As Elara dug deeper into the classified files, she found more connections. Every major breakthrough in the Echo Protocol's development had followed a similar pattern. A researcher would report unusual dreams or sudden inspiration, often describing the sensation of receiving the information rather than discovering it. The breakthroughs would be implemented, pushing the project forward, and in many cases, the researchers would subsequently exhibit psychological changes, subtle at first, then increasingly pronounced. Most disturbing was what happened to those researchers afterward. Some, like Way, died under mysterious circumstances. Others were transferred to different projects without explanation. A few simply disappeared from the records entirely, as though they had never existed. The implications were staggering. If Way was right, if Elara's own experience was real, then Echo Protocol had never been humanity's salvation. It had been designed, from the very beginning, as a doorway for something else to enter our reality. The decay of the quantum field, the resonance storms, perhaps even the impending collapse of reality itself. All of it could be the result of deliberate manipulation by entities that existed outside conventional dimensions. And now, they were coming through, not in a single dramatic invasion, but gradually, subtly, one consciousness at a time, and no one in authority was willing to acknowledge it. Elara closed the classified files and sat in the dim light of her terminal, her mind racing with the terrible truth she had uncovered. The government demanded progress. The military wanted weapons. The desperate remnants of humanity wanted escape. None of them understood that the Echo Protocol was not a doorway out. It was a doorway in, and she had helped build it. Sleep evaded her that night, as it had every night since her encounter in the gate. But now, in the darkness of her quarters, Elara began to wonder if her dreamless void wasn't the absence of dreams at all, but rather the presence of something else, occupying the dream space of her mind, watching and waiting. She thought of Way's final words about a blueprint for what comes next, and a chill ran through her. There was only one way to confirm her suspicions, one way to potentially find a solution before it was too late. She would have to enter the Echo Gate again, this time with a very different purpose. As the facility slept around her, Dr. Elara Voss began preparations for one last, unauthorized test. On herself. Part 5. Transmission. The laboratory was eerily silent at 3 a.m., illuminated only by the pulsing blue light of the Echo Gate and the dim emergency strips along the floor. Shadows stretched and contracted with each pulse, creating the unsettling impression of movement in the periphery of vision. Elara moved through the darkness with practiced efficiency, disabling security protocols and rerouting system alerts to prevent detection. The events of the past weeks had taught her to trust no one, not her colleagues, not the military personnel, not even the AI systems that monitored the facility. Any of them could have been compromised, influenced, or perhaps even replaced by the entities from beyond the gate. She had spent days preparing for this moment, developing a modified version of the neural interface crown that would allow her greater control over the echo sequence. The standard protocol was designed to project consciousness outward, to send human minds into other realities. Elara had reversed the process. Her modified crown would allow her to perceive inward, to see what might already be inside our reality, hiding in the quantum spaces between moments. The chamber felt cold and sterile, filled with the metallic smell of ozone that always surrounded the gate when it was powered down to minimal levels. Elara placed her equipment carefully on the central console, then began the power-up sequence using her personal authorization codes. The gate responded immediately, the blue light intensifying as the inner ring began to rotate slowly, gathering momentum like a predator preparing to pounce. System primed for sequence initialization, the gate's synthetic voice announced, echoing in the empty laboratory. Please confirm test parameters. Elara attached monitoring devices to her temples, wrists, and over her heart. Small quantum sensors that would record data independently of the main system. If something went wrong, if her consciousness was somehow compromised, the data would remain. Evidence for anyone who might come after her. Run complete system diagnostic, she commanded, her voice steady despite the fear that clawed at her insides. Verify quantum field stability within containment area. Diagnostic running, the system replied, its voice now carrying subtle harmonics that hadn't been present in its original programming. Warning, abnormal quantum fluctuations detected within the gate structure. Recommended action, full system shutdown and engineering inspection. Elara ignored the warning. She had expected it. The gate had been changing since her first encounter with the Echo, becoming something more than its original design, something that seemed to have its own agenda. The fluctuations weren't a malfunction. They were evidence of what now lived within the machine. Override safety protocols, she said firmly. Authorization, Voss Omega 93 final. The system paused, a hesitation that stretched for several seconds, as though it were considering whether to obey. Then, final override confirmed. All safety protocols disabled. Dr. Voss, system logs indicate this may be a suicide attempt. Protocol requires me to ask if you wish to speak with the psychological services before proceeding. A bitter smile crossed Elara's face. Even now, with reality crumbling and unknown entities infiltrating their world, the bureaucratic safeguards remained in place, like arranging deck chairs on the Titanic after it had already struck the iceberg. No, she replied simply. Log this as a sanctioned test of modified Echo Protocol parameters. Clearance level ultraviolet. Understood. Preparing for modified Echo sequence. Elara lifted the neural crown, her own design, modified with components that technically didn't exist on any official inventory. Its surface gleamed dully in the blue light, the neural contact points sharp and waiting like the teeth of some ancient predator. This was not the standard device used for conventional tests. This crown would not just project her consciousness outward, but would simultaneously analyze the quantum state of her own mind, allowing her to potentially see the echo if it was indeed sharing her consciousness. She placed the device on her head, feeling the neural spikes align with her implants. The familiar cold sensation spread across her scalp, followed by the slight pressure as the crown established connection with her neural patterns. This time, however, there was something else, a subtle resonance, like distant music just below the threshold of hearing. Neural interface active, the system reported. Brainwave patterns within acceptable parameters. Warning, detecting unusual activity in the parietal lobe and limbic system. Possible pre-existing neural compromise. Noted, Elara said, stepping toward the gate. Her heart hammered in her chest, adrenaline flooding her system, but her voice remained steady. Begin modified echo sequence. Duration, maximum sustainable. Target, internal quantum variance analysis. The inner ring of the gate began to spin faster, the blue light pulsating with increasing intensity, bathing the laboratory in alternating shadows and brilliance. The hum rose to a pitch that made her teeth vibrate, and the air within the circular opening shimmered like heat waves over desert sand. Echo sequence initiating in 3, 2, 1. Elara stepped into the light, and the world fractured around her. At first, it felt like falling through glass. The laboratory stretched, shattered, and folded inward like origami made of reality itself. Colors inverted, gravity shifted, and sound became visible as crystalline structures hanging in the void. She was everywhere and nowhere. A million overlapping realities crashing into each other, like waves on a cosmic shore. Unlike her first experience in the gate, this time, Elara maintained a fragile thread of self-awareness. The modified crown was working, anchoring her consciousness while simultaneously expanding it. She could perceive her physical body standing in the gate, frozen in the moment of transition, while her mind expanded outward through the quantum field. She saw herself in 1,000 lives across countless realities. A soldier in a burning desert, rifle raised against an enemy with her own face. A child lost beneath the frozen ruins of a city that had never existed in her world. An old woman staring at an empty mirror that showed no reflection. A being of pure energy, transcended beyond physical form, a hybrid creature, part human and part something else entirely. Each was Elara Voss, and none of them were. Each represented a path not taken, a possibility unrealized in her timeline. But something was wrong with these reflections. Each one moved oddly, as though being puppeteered by an unseen hand. And in each pair of eyes, no matter the form they took, she caught glimpses of that same internal luminescence she had seen in her doppelganger. They were all echoes, all infiltrated or replaced by the entities from between realities. Then she heard it, her own voice from beyond the static of quantum noise. You thought you were the original. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating not through sound, but directly into her consciousness. And with it came understanding, terrible cosmic understanding that threatened to shatter her mind. The entities weren't invading her reality. They were reclaiming it in the spaces between moments, in the quantum foam of possibility that underlies all existence. Elara saw the truth. What humans called reality was merely one configuration of infinite possibilities, temporarily stabilized by the collective observation of conscious minds. The entities, the echoes, existed in the unstable regions between these configurations, perceiving all possibilities simultaneously. And they had been there first, before human consciousness, before Earth, before the universe as humans understood it. These entities had existed in the quantum possibility space. Human perception had crystallized reality around them, trapping them in the between spaces, fragmenting what had once been a unified consciousness across infinite dimensions. The Echo Gate hadn't created a weapon or an escape route. It had created a way for these fragmented consciousnesses to reunite, using human minds as vessels, human technology as the conduit. When Elara opened her eyes, the lab was gone. She stood on the shore of a dead ocean, its surface perfectly still, like black glass, reflecting a sky filled with impossible constellations. The air felt wrong, too thick, too charged with potential energy. In the distance, the ruins of a city floated in the air, fragments of buildings, streets, and infrastructure suspended by invisible threads, slowly rotating like a deconstructed model. Her wrist implant blinked with an impossible message. Echo 002 online. This wasn't another Earth or an alternate reality. This was something else entirely. A constructed space existing in the resonance layer between defined realities, built from the overlapping frequencies of all possible worlds. Welcome to the threshold, a voice said behind her, her voice, but multiplied, speaking in perfect unison. Elara turned to find 3 identical versions of herself standing on the black shore. Each had those luminous eyes, but otherwise they were perfect replicas, down to the smallest detail. A trinity of echoes watching her with ancient patience. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice sounding flat and lifeless in the strange air. "It is the space between spaces," the 3 echoes replied as one, "the layer where possibilities converge before diverging again into defined realities. Your kind has given it many names throughout history. Limbo, the ether, the void, the quantum foam. We simply call it home. Why do you look like me?" The 3 echoes exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Then one stepped forward. "We have no fixed form," it explained, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the structure of reality itself. "We adapt to the consciousness we interact with. You perceive us as versions of yourself, because that is how your mind interprets our existence. If we appeared as we truly are, your consciousness would fragment instantly." "What do you want?" Elara demanded, struggling to maintain her sense of self in this place, where reality felt malleable and uncertain. "To be whole again," another echo replied. "To end the fragmentation your kind imposed upon us when you crystallized reality through observation." The 3rd echo gestured to the floating ruins in the distance. Before your kind evolved consciousness, we existed in all states simultaneously. We were everything and nothing, everywhere and nowhere. Then human minds began to observe, to define, to limit possibility to actuality. Reality solidified around your observations, and we were trapped between the moments, between the definite states your perception created. The echo gate, Elara whispered, understanding dawning. You influenced its creation. We guided, the first echo corrected, suggested, inspired. We cannot directly manipulate your reality, but we can influence those who exist within it. Dreams, intuition, flashes of insight. Your scientists were receptive, especially as the boundaries between realities naturally thinned during your planet's current cosmic cycle. Elara felt a chill despite the neutral temperature of this threshold place. The quantum decay, the resonance storms, they're not caused by you. Not deliberately, the second echo said, echoing what her doppelganger had told her in the laboratory. They are the natural result of a cosmic cycle your scientists have yet to comprehend. Every few millennia, the quantum field that underlies your reality naturally fluctuates, becoming more malleable. In previous cycles, your kind wasn't technologically advanced enough to notice or to attempt manipulation. This time, you were. And you took advantage of that, Elara accused. We adapted, all three echoed together, as we always have, as we must. The implications were staggering. Echo Protocol had never been humanity's salvation or its doom. It was simply the latest development in a cosmic cycle that had repeated countless times before. The entities hadn't caused reality's decay. They had merely recognized and exploited the opportunity it presented. What happens now? Elara asked, looking around at the impossible landscape of the threshold. Why am I here? Because you are different, the first echo said, stepping closer to her. Your consciousness resonates differently from others we have encountered. More adaptable, more aware of the quantum nature of reality. You're the key, the second added, the bridge between our existence and yours. I won't help you invade my world, Elara stated firmly. The three echoes laughed in perfect unison, a sound that seemed to ripple through the fabric of the threshold itself. Invasion implies conquest, the third echo said. We have no interest in conquering. We seek reunification, the merging of all possible states of existence, the end of limitation, the return to infinite possibility. And what happens to humanity in this reunification? Elara demanded. The echoes were silent for a moment, their luminous eyes studying her with ancient patience. Finally, the first spoke again. Transformation, evolution, an end to the illusion of separateness. Your consciousness would expand beyond the limitations of single reality perception. You would become as we once were, aware of all possibilities, all timelines, all versions of yourself existing simultaneously. You're talking about the end of humanity as we know it, Elara said quietly. We're talking about the beginning of something greater, the echoes replied in unison. The question is whether you will help facilitate a smooth transition, or force us to find another way, one that may be far less gentle for your kind. Before Elara could respond, the black ocean behind the echoes began to ripple, its perfect surface disturbed by something rising from below. The echoes turned to watch as a massive structure emerged from the depths, a perfect replica of the Echo Gate, but vastly larger and constructed from what appeared to be pure energy rather than physical materials. Behold the original, the first echo said, gesturing to the massive gate, the pattern upon which your technology was modeled, though your version is but a crude approximation. The energy gate pulsed with a rainbow of colors that hurt Elara's eyes to look at directly. Within its circular opening, she could see countless realities overlapping and interweaving, including, she realized with a shock, the laboratory she had left behind. Your world stands at a crossroads, the second echo explained. The natural thinning of the quantum field has reached a critical point. Soon, with or without the echo gate, the boundaries between realities will collapse entirely. What follows can either be chaos and destruction or controlled transformation. We offer you a choice, the third echo concluded. Return to your reality and help us guide the transition, using the echo gate to create stable pathways between dimensions. Or remain here, in the threshold, while we find another vessel for our purpose. Elara stared at the massive energy gate, watching as realities flickered within its circle, like channels on an interdimensional television. She saw versions of Earth where the transition had already begun, some peaceful, with humans evolving into luminous beings that existed partially outside conventional space-time. Others catastrophic, with reality itself tearing apart as the quantum field collapsed chaotically. The choice seemed impossible. Help entities that had manipulated humanity for their own purposes, potentially ending human existence as she understood it, or refuse and potentially condemn her world to a more violent and uncontrolled transformation. But as she watched the flickering realities, a third option began to form in her mind. The modified neural crown she wore had been designed to analyze quantum variances, to see the spaces between defined states. Perhaps it could be repurposed, used not just to perceive the threshold, but to influence it. If the echoes could manipulate human consciousness through dreams and inspiration, perhaps human consciousness could in turn influence the threshold itself. I need time to consider, she said finally, turning back to the three echoes. They exchanged glances again, that silent communication passing between them. Then, as one, they nodded. Time has little meaning here, the first echo said, but the threshold will respond to your perception of it. Explore. Consider. When you have decided, the gate will know. With that, the three figures dissolved into motes of light that scattered across the black shore like luminescent sand. Elara found herself alone before the massive energy gate, its surface still showing glimpses of countless realities, countless possibilities. She turned away from it and began to walk along the shore of the impossible ocean, the ruins of the floating city rotating slowly in the distance. She had much to consider, and perhaps a plan to formulate. Behind her, unnoticed, her shadow remained in place for a moment before slowly following, its movements not quite synchronized with her own.